Ruchem Abba B'Shem Hashem. B'Shem Yegin Shvitar, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Rabbi Yakov Zev Smith Shlita, Dinei Tisha Sayomim, the 9 days in Halacha. Rav Smith Shlita.
The truth is that the 9 days have a whole different group of shilas. The questions about eating meat, drinking wine by a simcha, wearing Bigdi Shabbos, what to buy, giving matanos. And last week we spoke about the halachos of what we call the 12 days, which in other words from Shavasa B'Tammuz until Rosh Chodesh Av. And this week we're going to talk about specifically the 9 days. Now it's a totally independent shir. If you weren't here last week, it's not a steer to this week. It's two different shurim, it's two different sugyas and halacha. But basically, as we know, the 12 days, as we call it, from Shavasa B'Tammuz until Tisha B'Av, until Rosh Chodesh Av, is nowhere in the Gemara. It's not a Mishnayos. It's minhagim, especially for Ashkenazim. But the bulk of the halachos for the 9 days is very much mefurish in Chazal. The Mishnah says in Tainis Chavav Medbeis, Mishnechnes of mama'tin בשמחה. You have to decrease or totally stop simcha. We'll soon see what the word mama'tin means. And that's gepaskin in Shulchan Aruch, beginning of our Siman Tov Kuf Nun Aleph. Now what's interesting, one of the most beloved halachos is Mishnechnes od marben besimcha. That's not in Gemara, that's not in Mishnayos, and that's not in Shulchan Aruch. That is, we'll soon see in the Gemara, Daf Chavtes, the Gemara says, Kishem she Mishnechnes od mama'tin besimcha, so too Mishnechnes ador marben besimcha. But the marben besimcha of Oda is not a Mishnah and not in Shulchan Aruch. But be that as it may, that Lamaisa, the Mishnechnes Oda has more mazel, and you see we put up signs all over the place. Not a bad idea to put up signs Mishnechnes of mama'tin besimcha, because something it's halachos that unfortunately is overlooked the whole 9 days, needs a chizuk. But whatever the case is, it's no doubt about it, the site of the 9 days is mefurish in the Mishnah, Mishnechnes of mama'tin besimcha. And of course from Rosh Chodesh till Tisha B'Av is 9 days. Lamaisa, you might ask, mama'tin besimcha? Don't we know the importance of simcha? Tachas hashlevadas Hashem lakecha besimcha, ivdu es Hashem besimcha. And of course the simple teretz is, like they say, there's a time and place for everything. Now avada, being depressed, atzvis, is never ever permissible, is never functional, it's never the right thing. You know, people hear that they were atzvis, it's something that only brings churban avodas Hashem. I once heard a beautiful vort, B'Shem Rabbi Shakafayel Mendelowitz. He said, atzvis and merirus are two different things. Atzvis is treif. Merirus is very productive. What's the chiluk? Atzvis, a person's depressed, it puts him in the sick bed. I don't want to go, I'm doing nothing, I'm a nobody. And he becomes dysfunctional. Merirus is faker, it gets him out of the sick bed. What's going on with me? How could I go on like this? I'm not learning, I'm not davening. What's going to be with me? I'm getting older. And that gives him chizuk. So atzvis puts him in the sick bed, merirus takes him out of the sick bed. But avada doesn't mean, ma'atim simcha does not mean not to be atzvis. What does it mean, as we'll soon see? So that's based on the Gemara in Yevamis Mem Gimel, that we stop activities that bring simcha. For example, buying things, home renovations, that's the mashal of mama'tin besimcha. Another good mashal, we'll soon see the details, but what the Mishnah says, mama'tin besimcha, is also going on getting married. The Kolbei says this, Rashi in two places in the Sefer and Paras HaGadol, all say that mama'tin besimcha is going on getting married, because the biggest simcha is getting married. So obviously that's why the halacha, the minhag is, we don't get married for the 9 days. The Magen Avram wonders about the lashon, if the Mishnah says mama'tin besimcha, does it mean entirely nothing of actions of simcha? So he points to a Tosha Megillah, the end of the Hayam Beis, that Tosha says, regarding a different context of when there's a drought, when there's a problem and they're fasting, so avu elu v'loinenu mama'tin besimcha. Zok Tosha, mama'tin besimcha means we don't do any activity, and it's a gamri, totally not after this period. Why? So Tosha says, had it been something that's mutter, the Gemara should have said something. If it says Mamatan b'simcha, period, it's totally. So no action of simcha is permissible in these days. As I looked, the Magen Avram in Sivkot and Aleph. The Sharatzion, Sivkot and Aleph also, he quotes Magen Avram, he says, but it could be, it's not true, because we find a different place that certain things are mutter. So it's hard to say exactly. The Ali Rabbi and the Chayodam do quote the Magen Avram, Mamatan b'simcha means the Gamri, and the Mishnah Berurah only quotes the Magen Avram in Mishnah Berurah. In the Sharatzion, he says, Yesh Ladain. So Lamaisa will say, Be'ikar, we should at least know that Av has to be different, and basically to stop any activity that brings simcha. Of course not Avodas Hashem, all Tzaddikim said, has to be b'simcha like always, but it shouldn't be a focus on increasing simcha. You'll ask me, why? Such a severe halacha, mama'atin b'simcha. So you think about what Av is all about. The Shlach Kodesh teaches Av is the Rosh Tevis, Edom, and Babel. Both Churbanos took place on Tisha B'Av. Rosh Chodesh Av is the beginning of that. So obviously it's a day of great tsar. The Gemara in Tainis Daf Yud Gimel quotes of Chanina Saganar Kahanim, Kedayu Beis Elokeinu Lavad Olav Tefila Achas B'Shana. In other words, the Gemara is talking about if it's mutter to make a Tfilas mitzvah, and the Gemara says, really, it might be mutter because it's not l'tainug. But it's kedai. The Beis HaMikdash, the Churma is kedai to give up a tefillah once a year. So that's really the attitude we have to have. Kedai hu Beis Elokeinu. In fact, Toises in Be'ed, David Chesem Be'ed, Damaskal Kol, Toises says, Bizman that they toiveled, when they mechuyev the tefillah, when they had Tum Tara, it was la halacha that even though on Yom Kippur you're allowed to do a tefillas mitzvah, but not on Tisha B'Av. How could that be? Tisha B'Av is the Rabbanon and Yom Kippur is the Raisa. So Toises quotes this concept. Kedayu Beis Elokeinu shenevad olav tefillah achas. So in a certain sense, we can honestly say la halacha that Yom Kippur, Tisha B'Av is more chama than Yom Kippur. One of my greatest Rabbeim once told me before Tisha B'Av, he was a person who was always ill, who was hot in the fast. Ich zitte mehr von Tisha B'Av wie von Yom Kippur. I'm more scared of Tisha B'Av Yom Kippur. I asked him why. Weil auf Tisha B'Av steht, in Tainis Daf Lamed Beis, Mi she'einu mesabel Yishalayim, ein roya b'simchasa. And the Shaboli Aleket adds in Reish Ayin Daled, even if he'll live to this Zman HaGeula, he'll be Zoycha to Yemais HaMashiach. But if he didn't cry about the Churban, he can't enjoy the Geula. So he said, on Yom Kippur, if I'm Oynis, I'm Potter. But on Tisha B'Av, what's going to be? Kedai Beis Elokeinu. Whatever the case, we should all be gesund, but definitely the attitude has to be that these days have to be different days. The question is, fine, what's included al pi halacha in these days? What does it mean, mamatan b'simcha? So what came to my mind is, what is in a certain sense la halacha, a chefetz of simcha, that's the right word. I know. In Psachim, Daf Kuf Tesam and Aleph, the Gemara says, Ein simcha el b'basa, and then words later, Ein simcha el b'yayin. So, and that's why on Yom Tov, the mitzvah of simchas Yom Tov can be fulfilled with basa v'yayin. So now we can make a simple extension of that. If al pi halacha Ein simcha el basa v'yayin, it makes sense that what does it mean matam b'simcha? Comes with Chodesh, stop eating wine, stop eating meat and drinking wine. Pashut. If meat and wine is simcha, so matam simcha means don't eat meat or drink wine. But that is absolutely not true. How do I know? Because the same Mishnah, Daf Chav Tasma Beis, Daf Chavav Beis, after it says matam simcha, erev Tisha B'Av, which is Surim Afsekes, lo yochel adam shnei tavshilin. Don't eat more than one tafshil. That's why only eat an egg by the Surim Afsekes. V'lo yochel basav la yishta yayin. So we did have Mishnah, same Mishnah in fact, that you're allowed to have meat and wine until Sud Mafsekes. But Rosh Chodesh man dechar shmei. So it absolutely cannot be that the din of the Mishnah of Matin B'Simcha is going on Bas V'Yayin. Now it bothered me, why Taka not? Why Taka didn't the Chazal Asa Bas V'Yayin? I looked, I couldn't find much about it, but I found at the end of my searching, the Meiri says a few words on the Mishnah. he asked the kasha, why taka dina yasa basa v'yayin al simcha? So he says a very like cryptic message. True. Ein simcha ela b'basa. Mikol makom simchas achila b'lei basa. That taka is true. Ein simcha ela b'basa. Aval achilas basa b'li simcha ikka. I think he's saying is a person can eat meat. This is the Torah gives him koyach to learn. It's lav dafka that he's doing it out simcha. So why chazal ask to eating meat that you need? So I think he means to say that since the ma'isa basa could be is needed, that's why they didn't asa midin ha-mishnah. But the ma'isa, as we know, midin ha-mishnah, it's mutta until the Suda Mafsekes. But the minhag, as we'll soon see, is basa v'yayin. We don't eat during the 9 days. Sefardim, many Sefardim begin that minhag on Shvu Shechalboi. So now we're really a little flustered. So what does it mean? Pashup Shat in the Mishnah, Mishnechnes of Matim B'Simcha. So I know what it means. It means avelus. Don't take a shower, and don't laundry, don't take a haircut. Also, absolutely not true. Because the same Mishnah, I'm amazed, in fact the next words, Mishnechnes of Matim B'Simcha, then the Mishnah adds, Shabbos Shechal Tisha B'Av Lias B'Saychai, Asa Milachabes, in other words, the word Shabbos in this Mishnah does not mean Shabbos Kodesh. Shabbos means Shvuah, like Hayom Shlishi B'Shabbos. So the Mishnah is saying, when does the avelus begin of laundering and taking haircuts? Shvuah Shechal Boy. So in the same Mishnah that said Mishnechnes Av Matim B'Simcha, it says, but avelus in Yonim begins on the Shvuah Shechalboi. So now we see not avelus and not bas v'yayin. So back to the original question. So what does it mean? So Lamaisa, the Gemara in Chavtes, and Masechta Tainis towards the end of the Masechta, seems to clarify this point. Zokti Gemara in Chavtes, Kishem shemishanichnis of amatim b'simcha, kach mishanichnis adar marbim b'simcha. Hilkach, and here's the big hilkach. Hilkach means therefore. In other words, I'm going to give you halacha l'maisa for mishanichnis of and mishanichnis adar. Zok the Gemara, the famous Gemara, if a person has a court case in the days of push it off until, if possible, until adar. Why? Because on chodesh of the Dr. Zaktimar Reya Mazle, our Mazle is bad, but on Adar is Bari Mazle, so you're better off going to court on Adar. And this is quoted in Sif Aleph of our very big Simon Tafkuf Nun Aleph. In other words, the Gemara is saying, what does it mean, Matim B'Simcha? We have to realize the days have a certain amount of piranhas in it, a certain amount of tzaras. Taisus quotes the Lashon of the Gemara that Migavon Choyvai De Chayiv, don't forget, 2 Batei Migs were destroyed on the same day. It's Reya Mazle, it's Muchal Piranhas. In fact, the Ritva on our Gemara asked, what are you talking about, Reya Mazle? We paskin as Gemara Meshabes Kuf Nun Vav, Ein Mazal Yisrael. Yidden are not dictated, are not controlled by Mazal. So the Ritva says a Murdi Kechiddish. True. We are above Mazal, except for 2 months. Adar and Av, we're under Mazal. Then the second teretz, which I probably is more posh to understand, or maybe the word Mazal, Reya Mazal, is lav dafka Mazal. But it means a gzeira ra. In other words, it's lav dafka Mazal, it's a Shem Mushal. In other words, it's days of gzeirais, rois, piranhas. And the truth is, we mentioned the other week, the Mechaba in the end of Tafkuf Nun Aleph, quoting a Medrash is in Eicha Chav Tes Aleph, to be careful not to go out on the 3 weeks between the hours of 4 and 9, because there's a Ruach Tumah that's circulating the area, and also the Rebbeim should not hit Talmidim during the 3 weeks. And there the Medrash says, why? Because Yimei HaMetzarim, Yisigu Bein HaMetzarim, Metzarim Lashon of Tsar. It's days of Tsar, of Tzaris. And this we know, this we see. The Mechaba says not to make a Shechiyanu in the 3 weeks. Even the Mechaba, who doesn't even recognize 3 weeks. He doesn't recognize the 9 days. The Ik is Shvu Shechalboi. But Shechiyanu Lazman Hazeh, days are perennials. And it's interesting, the B'yamin Zeh, quoting this halacha of making Shechiyanu these days, he says because they're days of Evel V'tzar. So this seems to be what the Gemara is explaining Al Kaponim, that this is the Mishnechnes Av Mama'atin B'Simcha. It's days of Tsar and Tsaris, and we have to be careful what we do in those days. It's Reya Mazir. Now, so we didn't find yet any specific halachas. Okay, going to court, how often does it take place? So here we'll say that Lamaisa, besides the Mishnah, Daf Chavav, besides the Gemara, Daf Chavtes, the Kosev HaShlishi is a Gemara in Yevamis, Daf Mem Gimel. The Gemara seems to fill in all the information that we need. Zog the Gemara, Mirash Chodesh Aratainis, what we call the 9 days, Ein Nois Nashim, and that's one of the things that we don't do during the 9 days. Oh, this I understand. Because if you're talking about being mamayit in action that brings simcha, getting married is the biggest simcha. And that's taka the minhag of Sefardim, not to get married during the 9 days. But it's not the end yet. Because the Shulchan Aruch quotes this, but there are more ads that the minhag of Ashkenazim is not to get married for the entire 3-week period. So obviously, it's such a reya mazlei that the Chazal pushed off a mitzvah rabbah called getting married for 3 weeks. Something we never do. So that's one halacha. We mentioned last week the Shvus Yakov Chelik Beis Laman Hey was asked by an alman who never had children, and he wanted to get married during the 3 weeks to raise a family, and he made a kavachayim. Maduch, even during Avelis for a parent, if it was not Makayim Puruvu, he's allowed to get married during the Shloishim. So Kolshkein during the 3 weeks. So Shosaka says, you might be right in halacha, but it's Reya Mazlei, it's not time to get married, like Simna Milsa, and don't do it. So this is clear, the example of the Mishnah is getting married. But the same Gemara has a few other examples. Zok the Mishnah, Zok the Gemara in Yivamas Daf Mem Gimel, Koydem Azman Hazeh, which means in the period of from Rosh Chodesh of until Tisha B'Av, the 9 days, Mema'atin be'iskayim milisa v'lita, and taka there was a minhag that they worked less during the 9 days. So the Mishnah says, already quoting Achrayim, because we need it for Panasa, then we're not so makbid, but it is kedai to work less during the 9 days. That's number one. Milivnois v'lintoya, to build and to plant. We'll soon see what that means. And basically, to do anything of simcha, arsin, you're allowed to get engaged, because it's not a full simcha. Avaloi kainsin, you can't get married. And the ein oisin sudas erisin. Even certain sudas are awesome, because it brings simcha. And this is quoted in Siv Beis, from Rosh Chodesh until the Tainis, Mema'atan Masa Mema'atan, Bebinyan Shel Simcha, going Beis Chasnus Lebnoi, to make a chuppah for your child. And those they made it more elaborate. Oy Binyan Shel Tziyah V'Kir, Uvenatiyah Shel Simcha, the Mechaber explains, to make a nice shady area so you could sit there and feel like a melech. In other words, the point is, things that bring simcha are inappropriate in the 9 days. Days of Golas Edom and Golas Bavel are not days for simcha. So it's not that we stop being happy, chas v'shalom. A person has to be b'simcha. But we stop doing activities that prompt and promote simcha. So again, you look at it very careful. What you building what you don't need, planting what you don't need, stop making a beautiful landscaping punk during the 9 days. Like, why now? Adding a room to your house, why now? Did you forget that Avinu Avarachman doesn't even have a house? Baruch Shalom Kaviyachal is homeless. You're worrying about adding to your extension to your room. Where's the Baruch Shalom's house? Adam destroyed one, Bavel destroyed one. Well, what are you building your house? What about the Baruch Shalom's house? So the issa is binyanim, as we'll soon see, of harvacha, what you don't really need, of an extra, a pleasure, a comfort. What's needed, we'll soon see, is mutter. So here we have the sugya kamat. The Mishnah says ma'itna b'simcha. The Mishnah says avelus mikadim begins shvu shechal boy. Our minhag is we start from 9 days, except for hair cutting we have for 3 weeks. That's the minhag of Ashkenazim. The poskim do add the Gemara is Isra Mazle. It's a bad mazel when we have during these 9 days. But the Gemara in Yavamis is a Kasav Ashlishi. Anything that brings Simcha should not be done. But before we apply it Lamaisa, I must make two important points. The Gemara in Tainis says it's also Lechabes and even Lahaniach. In other words, to wash during the 9 days is awesome, even if you don't wear it. You wash, put it away for after the 9 days. Why? If the issa is just can't wear laundered clothing, why can I wash and put it away for after the 9 days? So Rashi says some key words. The nira, the masiach daitoi. He is forgetting about the avelos. You hear what they're holding? They were so much tuned in that to do a laundry, even though you're not wearing it, so you're not going to have the simcha wearing it. But why are you busy washing laundry during days of avelos? So midina gemara, it's also to wash even though he won't wear it until after the 9 days. And this is quoted in Shulchan Aruch Siv Gimel, that Shvu Shechalba, which the minhag of Sefardim, they don't make it laundry. But Lamaisi, even if you don't want to wear it, Zot Magen Avram, the nera the Masiach daitem yavelus. So much they were focused, Chazal didn't want you to divert your attention to something else. But even more, the Ramah says in the end of C Beis, it's also to give your clothing into a cleaners from during the 9 days. Not only that, even if you tell the cleaners, I don't need it till a week from now, tell them you go do it after Tisha B'Av. Merely giving in clothing to a cleaners is also in the 9 days. Why? It can't be Amir L'Akum because they're not doing it during the 9 days. Again, the Magen Avram says, because this is Hesach Hadas. You're giving your clothes, why do it now? Why not do it after Tisha B'Av? We have a few days of Shvu Shechalbai or of the 9 days, and you're still busy with your clothing and your house and your Natiyah. So this is the concept that's called Hesach Hadas. Now we have this problem. We have a few hundred B'nai Torah in our camp, and Lamaisa, they have to bring in the cleaners, stuff to the cleaners. So someone had a brilliant idea, quote unquote. The Tisha B'Av, the afternoon, anyhow, no one's learning. We'll make an announcement. Bring your clothing to the office now. You'll pay now. You'll take care of it. So this way, tomorrow you can be free to go back to, tzedek to the geld, tzedek to the welt. Wrong. It's Hesach Hadas. On Tisha B'Av, you're taking care of laundry. Another problem we have, which is somewhat unsolvable, there's that amount of washes and dryers for 400 brachim, which doesn't work. So the only way to do it is you make a goyrel. Yeah, you make a goyrel. You pick who's the first, second, third. But to do that during Tisha B'Av, again, is totally inappropriate. Now, even during the 9 days, is not the right thing. Maybe do it Nitzai Tisha B'Av. But the point is, the concept of Hesach Hadas is integral to the halachos. And then there's one more attitude that we have to have, and then we'll apply this Lamaisa. The Mechaber says in Siv Yud Daled, also ligdoilim lesaper liktanim ulechabes ksusam b'shah bezu shechal Tisha B'Av lias b'soich. In other words, for the Mechaber, everything was Shvu Shechalbai. But for us, it's 9 days. It's awesome to cut hair and do laundry for children. And the Trumas Hadeshin and Simon Kuf Nun Beis points out, this seems to be even a child shaloi higil lechinuch. So now the question is, if he's lo higil lechinuch, why can't you give him a haircut and why can't you wash his clothing? So Dr. Trumas Hadeshin, he sends you to a Gemara by cotton Yudal and Beis, a Mavaldika, concept, but it's an attitude we need. The Gemara there says, Rahman al-Islam, if a young child loses a parent, Mekaron l'kotan me'agmas nefesh. So now it's Levaya, and this child is Leigi L'chinuch, so there's no Chiyav Kriya. But there's still, you do Kriya to that child. Zok Rashi, that they tear why are you giving him Kriya if he's Leigi L'chinuch? Alt Agmas Nefesh, Sheyivchu Aroyim, V'yirbu, B'choyr HaMeis, V'loimit Mei, that he's an Avelis, because he's too young. It's an unbelievable concept. When you see a young child walk around with a torn jacket, it's mamish rice the hearts. It's mamish devastating. Chazal wanted that on Tisha B'Av also, and Chazal understood when you see a child walking around, and I see it makes a big roshim. We have bachim yungalite, and you have little children, children of the Rabbeim, and the mamish little children. They don't know anything about Tisha B'Av, but they're wearing slippers. Why are they wearing slippers? They put them on slippers. They don't even know. But for us, it's supposed to wake up the Agmas Nefesh. Tisha B'Av is for Klal Yisrael, from the youngest to the oldest. It's a day of meeting the reality that we're missing a Beis HaMikdash. So Chazal made halacha on Ktanim, not for the Kotnim, for the Gedolim. It's supposed to wake up this feeling of we're in Avelus of Klal Yisrael. It's an Avelus of a Rab. And Taka the Mechaba and Sifir Dalet says this, that the Gedolim cannot give children haircuts or wash their clothing because of the Agmas Nefesh concept. Now, of course, the same Shulchan Aruch adds, are more adds, but children that get all the clothing dirty and nothing to wear, Avada allowed to wash. But the point of what can be avoided, Avada should be avoided. Some feel this is why we don't give, if possible, we don't give meat to children, even though it's an Agmas Nefesh of the parent. And that's why Lamaisa, it has to be the attitude of focus. You know, people take punkte, they have to take family pictures during the 9 days, they have to dress up Shabbosdik. Well, soon as you don't have to be getting dressed up Shabbosdik. But even without them, why now? Now, somebody said, Yashiv, they finished the year, they want to take pictures of the graduating class. He goes, "Oi, what kind of question is that? We lost our heritage with 9 days taking pictures." You know, some things just don't fit into the bigger picture of what it's supposed to be. But whatever the case is, the Seder Hayoim, in the Mishnechnas, he puts it very, very clearly. Mama'atin b'simcha, and he says, Lamaisa, don't allow anything to come into your day that's going to divert your attention from the Avelos. And bad enough we don't do it a whole year, but at least these days, so now we have just the Chazon we learned, we saw, I think the whole sugi with all its yoifi. The Mishnah Tainis Chavav, Mama'atin b'simcha is going on Rosh Chodesh. The Mishnah says Avelus begins Mikidin Shvu Shechalboy. The Gemara Chavtes says Reya Mazlei, and it's Avelus, it's Tsar. And Yivamas Mem Gimel defines what it means, Mama'atin b'simcha, action that brings simcha. And then we have Rashi and Tainis, that very key word of Hesach Hadas, and Trumas Hadeshin's word of Agmas Nefesh. Now let's apply Lamaisa. I hope it should be simple. First of all, someone asked me once a number of years ago, his child was otot with a shidduch, and he wanted to know, should he announce it, make it official, or wait till after Tisha B'Av? Like about Vav, Hey or Vav, Ov. So one thing is Pashut. The Mishnah says, the Mishnah says, that and Shulchan Aruch said as well, you're allowed to get engaged even on Tisha B'Av. Besides, a shidduch is important, but can make it menu acha. So no doubt about it, don't push it off. Now, if you want to make it officially unofficial, that's fine, but make sure the shidduch takes place. The question is, what else can you do? So this we saw in the Gemara we mentioned earlier, that Lamaisa, you're not allowed to make a Sudas Erisin. Even though Sudas Erisin, Troyim, is considered a Simchas Mitzvah, and it's mutter to make it during the 3 weeks, the 12 days, but in the 9 days, Ma'arsin, but no Suda. And Nesuin is also categorically. So this is klar that Lamaisa, it's mutter to get married, to get engaged in these days. Rav Shlomo Zalman and the Cheshleima Perek Ches Ha'ara 34 says he remembers Rav David Baharan, one of the Gedolei Nikiya Dasi B'Shalayim, who made a shidduch on Tisha B'Av. Now, I don't know exactly why, but he did it. You could do it. What I want to add is what bothered me. Why are you allowed to make a shidduch, make the engagement on Tisha B'Av? I thought it's like Simna Milsa. The Gemara says, Bayis Tinik V'Isha, Yesh Bei Mishum Simon. That's that. And Isha is shidduch. Here it's very poshut. The concept of Reya Mazlei is because a chassan has to be with the Simon type or Mazel type. We don't do it Seif Chodesh. Many people don't do Seif Chodesh. We do it outside, which day you get married. No one's makbid to make the vort only Tchilas Chodesh or make it outside. The real Simna Milsa of Isha is marriage, not getting engaged. Even if it's Erisin. Erisin is a shtikla married, but it's still not the Simna Milsa of the actual Nesuin. So no doubt about it, it's mutter to get engaged. The sweetest Erisin cannot be done. Avada the Pais can say during the 9 days there's no dancing if you make a vort. In fact, the Mishburis is a chiddush. You can't make a sweetest Erisin, but you give cake and schnapps. That's okay. But to dance and pashtus, even to sing, is a problem. Singing the gunim of simcha. In the Halacha Shleima, Hara 35, they record there, Reb Shlomo Zalman was Meshadach, one of his children, on Vav of, and they have the entire procedure that he outlined for them. He says him and his Rebbetzin and the Chassan Kala come Bigdi Shabbos, and not to, he said when he started singing, he said no singing, and he said that Lamaisa, the fact that really they shouldn't be a Bigdi Shabbos, but if you come into your own vort, if you call it such, not dressed appropriately, it doesn't look good. But he said when it comes to singing should not be done. Now the truth is, during the 12 days we call from Shas B'Tammuz until Rosh Chodesh, singing is mutter. It's just dancing is also. But now it's a more intensified type of aveilus, and even singing should be a problem. Now, I should mention, someone asked me, why are you allowed to drink schnapps? Schnapps has alcohol, it's mesameach. Good kasha. But Lamaisa, we find in Shulchan Aruch, mutter lishtais kol minei shecha, you're allowed to drink beer. Doesn't say before schnapps, but I found the Yosef Oimitz in Tov Sof Samach Zayin spells out. He says, could be even schnapps made from wine is also mutter. Because Lamaisa, it's schnapps. Now, what's pshat? I saw the Shari Tshuva Sivka and Chafei, and all say schnapps is mutter. So the truth is, wine is also for two reasons. Number one, because it's Sameach, but number two, like you see in the Gemara, Yayin was brought for the Nesachim. How could you enjoy Yayin in these days? Basa is not only also because Basa is Simcha, because Basa was Karbonis. In fact, the Mar in Bava Basra says, when the Beis Mikdash was destroyed, the regular Yidden wanted to make a Gzeira, no more meat and no more wine. How can we eat meat? That was Karbonis. How can we drink wine? That was Nesachim. See, when I see a piece of meat, I see a Geshmak, a piece of meat. And they saw Churban. I see a cup of wine, I see wine. They saw Churban. So that's why one of the main reasons of the wine is because it was Nesachim. Schnapps, med, which the person we speak about, or beer is not wine. It could be taka mesameach, but it's not wine. So great is l'chal yayin l'chol davar. So that's why Lamaisa, the minhag is to taka drink schnapps, you make a l'chayim, but nothing more than that. Sai mitzad halacha, and of course mitzad hashkafa also. That's why Lamaisa, people ask about singing stam. Lamash, they want to have a campfire, a kumzitz. So it's not ruach chacham and noichem, and for sure. Maybe if you sing slow nigurim and all the time to do it, but the whole kibbutz of getting together and being being together is a problem. Simchas Mereis, the Aruch HaShulchan says, is awesome. That's why we don't make a sudas erisin. Now, Lamaisa, should someone make his vort taka when he gets engaged on vav of, like etc. etc. So it has to be a very toned down, a very minimal simcha. It's probably better to wait till after Tisha B'Av. But I would add, if someone knows if Tisha B'Av, he's going to make a chasana, quote unquote, makes a big affair that's taka a waste of money, make it vav, a small, and all the money you save on that wasted vort, give to your children or someone else's children, and do something wiser with the money. But no doubt about it, if it's going to be a modified vort, better push it off until after Tisha B'Av. The Sudas Preda, that's always a problem because the yeshiva ends Rosh Chodesh, or close to Rosh Chodesh, and some Bacham are leaving their Yisrael, leaving the yeshiva, so it became a minhag, you have a Sudas Preda. So Suda is mutter until Rosh Chodesh. After Rosh Chodesh, of course, Suda is awesome. Suda's Miriam is awesome. Singing again is only mutter by the 12 days. From Rosh Chodesh on, there should not be any singing. There could be speeches and quote haspeit like they do, but no actual singing. Lamaisa, the point is to have a feeling of the days. The Leked Yoisha was the Trumas Hadeshin's Hanagos, and I quote the Lashon. It's all the Svarim are printed with the English number. It's page 106. Lo'ama Zmiris V'Eliyahu, which is the Matzoi Shabbos Miris. He didn't say Smiris, Shabbos Miris. It was Eliyahu. Miyuzayin Tam is Ad Tisha B'Av. The Trumas Hadeshin, one of the Kadmonim, did not sing Zmiris during the 3 weeks on Shabbos. Now, if you can say, yeah, he probably, when he was maybe a German Yid, he didn't see. But Shabbos, Shabbat, Lo'yom Zmiris V'Eliyahu Miyad Zayin. Wait, the Zmiris is one thing, Eliyahu is something else. Absolutely. Wait. You can say, maybe he was, I think he was German. They didn't sing Zmiris. It's not true. You look at page 36 of Leked Yosha, the whole list of things he sang on a regular Shabbos. So he sang Zmiris. He was sympathetic to Zmiris. But Shabbos, he didn't sing Zmiris. Now, Lamaisa, it's not the minhag. We know that. That's not the minhag. But you'll know Shabbos Chazon. Some people dafka sang the Chadoidi with the sad niggin, or they say not to. But even Shabbos, the 3 Shabbos, he didn't think Zmiris. Now, it's not the minhag. But to start singing, a few days before Tisha B'Av, you call it a kumzik, you call it a get together, whatever it is, a campfire. So again, unless they feel there's no way to reach the Bacham until you have a campfire and they talk about the Churban, if someone is thinking and he makes that as a decision, but to make it, to schedule events, to keep the days, simchadik is really wrong, because that's not what they're supposed to be. So Lamaisa, Paiskim do say during learning, the Gemara says in Megillah, Lamed Beis, Hakayr b'lei Ne'ima, Keshayna b'lei Zimra. Okay, singing by learning, if it helps the learning, is good. Some people get involved with the singing, it becomes a concert that he doesn't learn, he disturbs others. I mean, when the learning is enhanced by the singing, avada, that's mut. About mitzvah during the 9 days. So it's something a little troubling, because in Svar HaYeshara, to quote the Lashon of the Amshel Shloima in Bava Kama, Ein lecha sudas mitzvah gadol mizu. The Magen Avram quotes a Lashon of one of the Kadmonim, mitzvah al-adam lasei suda b'yom shenasa b'noi bar mitzvah ki yom shenichnes l'chuppah. So no doubt the bar mitzvah celebration is very, very choshev. But the pella is, if you look at the Ramah and Sif Yud, what's mutter to make, which simchas are mutter to make during the 9 days? Sudas mitzvah goy mila, pidyon haben, b'siyim masechta, v'sudas erisin, a tanoim is mutter until Rosh Chodesh. No mention of a mitzvah. So the Chayodam already points out in Kuf Lamed Gimel Tezayin, the Ad Ephraim, also on the Magen Avram, that avad the mitzvah is also included, but it was left out. I'm not sure why, but no doubt about it. It's definitely mutter that to have a suda b'mitzvah even with basa v'yayin, you have ada. That's the chiddush. The only thing is shvur shechal boy. Some say only the immediate family, but if a mitzvah can be a regular sudas mitzvah, no different than a siyum. The Rabbi Yashiv, the Paiskim pointed out that it's to be a big day Shabbos for the bar mitzvah and parents and grandparents. Some add even the bar mitzvah boys' brothers to have a certain the hemshech, but no doubt about it that bizmanoi avad is mutter. The Paiskim discussed the mashmois rechayodam is that even shaloi bizmanoi. Let's say it comes out on the wrong, he could make the suda on the right day, as long as the boy darshins. So that the Yam Shleima says if he darshins, it becomes a sudas mitzvah. But the point is that you look at the 9 days, it's shrunk. It used to be Roy, the Shmaimi has made to the Egal Chorban. It used to be a ganzes im Tov Kuf Samach. We have the 3 weeks, 9 days. And if that's also going to be obsolete, what are we left with? There's a whole discussion about making Kiddush Levana before Tisha B'Av. So the Ramah and Sif Ches says minhag shleila Kiddush Levana ad achat Tisha B'Av. Why? Because we're not besimcha. Imagine what they were. Now, if you think about the cheshbon, when are you pushing it off till? So on a regular Tisha B'Av like this year, you're pushing it off until Yud B'Av. Now let's say Tisha B'Av Chal b'Shabbos, it's pushed off to Sunday. So when are you pushing off Kiddush Levana till? Yud Aleph. Now some learn the Lashon Ramah is we don't make Kiddush Levana until after Tisha B'Av. It doesn't say Matzai Tisha B'Av. Because Matzai Tisha B'Av, you're still depressed. You're still down. Like Matzah Tainus, some say don't make Kiddush Levana. So you're risking pushing it off till Yud Beis. Yud Beis. Tell a play. Because we're not besimcha. That's how much they felt the lack of simcha. Now, Lamaisa, some Dafka way did it before because they didn't want to wait. Mishpach Zalman did it before the Tisha B'Av. But I saw a number of Paiskim say, if you do it before Tisha B'Av, don't dance after Kiddush Levana. And we think it's part of the mitzvah, which Takar Ramah says, but Rav Sternbuch and Chelik Alstem and Reish Vav, the Mishnah Halachos, Chelik Yud also it seems, and that Pashtus, the Cyrus Tshuva says, if someone even makes Kiddush Levana on Shabbos when it's mutter, he shouldn't dance because dancing is also on Shabbos. So according to that, during the 9 days, it wouldn't be mutter to dance. But the point is that Chazal focused on the days that we have to make them count. I should mention that when we finally get to that Kiddush Levana, let's make it good. We're pushing it off 9, 10, 11, sometimes almost even 12, till Yud Beis. It reminds me of what I once saw, that the Shulchan Aruch says, in Hilchos Yom Kippurim, Tov Reish Beis, that the minhag is not to make Kiddush Levana until Motzei Yom Kippur, because we have Emes Adin. Now the Goyin and others say, but Lamaisa, if you do it before Yom Kippur, you have the schus of Kiddush Levana. So do it before Yom Kippur, which is an incredible thing. One Kiddush Levana makes the difference. Chaim Amavas is one Kiddush Levana? The answer is yes. But it bothered me, our minhag, or most of Klal Yisrael, is to make it Motzei Yom Kippur. Don't we need schusim? Don't we want to have a machriya? So I saw the Lavush of Anart. Lavush says, the fact that you push it off to make it when it's full simcha, that's the schus that's going to make a difference, Chaim Amavas. Look what a nuance of Yiddishkeit is all about. The answer is there's no nuance of Yiddishkeit. Everything's important. And making it besimcha is enough to machriya even before you're doing it after Yom Kippur. But it's going to go retroactively. It's going to be a schus michayim v'maves l'chayim. So that's why what has to be done with seichel, and especially I should mention the Ber Heitev and Sivkot and Chafei says that, quoting the Riyah Kodesh, not dafka do it on Motzei Yom Kippur, on Motzei Tisha B'Av, ki Motzei Tisha B'Av Noel ben David u'mevasun levana u'liyisrael shasidin l'schadesh. He's supposed to see in Kiddush Levana on Motzei Tisha B'Av that Mashiach is born this day, and just like he had an aliyah, we're also asidin l'schadesh kamois. The next group of questions is buying items during the 9 days. It happens for some reason people forget to buy their Tisha B'Av footgear, their sneakers, whatever it is. Can you buy it during the 9 days? So this is klar. Mr. Bura says it in Sivkot and Mem Hey. In the 12 days, beginning from Shabbos V'Tammuz until Rosh Chodesh, the only is buying expensive items that bring a simcha to the extent of Shechianu. But buying inexpensive items is mutter. That's in the 12 days. But comes along the 9 days, even inexpensive clothing is awesome. I'll ask, what's the pshat? Pasha. Until Rosh Chodesh, there's no issa of simcha, matn b'simcha, it's just a shechianu. So you're allowed to buy a pair of socks. But mishenich of matn b'simcha, and buying any item of clothing is a simcha, not a full simcha of shechianu, but it's a simcha. So therefore, any item of clothing would be awesome. And that's why it's kedai before the Rosh Chodesh for sure, maybe even before Shabbos V'Tammuz, you don't have to have on your mind. Buy what you need for Tisha B'Av. Let's say a person didn't. So here I saw halachos ketanis chelik beis kuflam betes minolam shel beged. Now this is what we call Tisha B'Av shoes. It's not really shoes. It's a material. So he says that lamaisa you're not supposed to wear new begadim on Tisha B'Av especially. But let's say lamaisa he forgot, and now it's almost Tisha B'Av. Can he wear them for the first time on Tisha B'Av? He says, well, how could you? It's a beged. We don't wear new begadim during the 9 days. He says, since it's zeicha of the avelos, it's mutter to do it. In other words, the whole thing is to make avelos. So hopefully you don't have a simcha from a avelos. That's what he wants to say. But he also concludes, bracha. If you want the bracha of the Trumas Hadesh, of the halachos ketanos, buy the sneakers, whatever you wear, and put them on before Tisha B'Av. That's pashut. Also, I must mention Leket Yoisha in page 107. He seemed to say that household items is mutter even during the 9 days if it's not a big simcha. A person needs a plate, a fork. He writes these type of things that you need is not awesome. It seems more than issa is on begadim. Maybe because begadim is more calls it that's the kibbut of a person, that's the cover of a person. But it seems that to buy household items, you're allowed to buy pens, you're allowed to buy what you need. In fact, you're allowed to buy svarim. It's not shopping across the board. It's shopping begadim primarily, even in expensive ones. And of course, to buy a big item that needs shechianu, avad is awesome. That's pasha, that's awesome, because that's the shechianu. Lamaisa, the next question is spot cleaning during the 9 days. Now, of course, we don't launder clothing, but sometimes he spilled on his jacket, bekitza, he got a stain. So spot cleaning, really, the word cleaning sounds like what's awesome. But then again, the simcha of laundering, you don't have in spot cleaning. You take a little bit off this stain, And so the Pa'ula is not laundering, and the Tetzah is also not. Now, Lamaisa, this is why it seems, I saw the Halicha Shloim and Yudal Tezvav, he said that Taka, it's mutter to spot clean. And he's talking about without water or a wet shmata. But if need be, l'chara, adding a little water is not any more of a din kibbutz. The beged is not cleaned, and basically it should be mutter. Now there are some that are machman. I can understand them because this is the weeks of Tisha B'Av. So l'maisa, if a can do it before the 9 days, it's better. But sometimes a person is mamash chel Hashem, he doesn't look proper. You know, tamachacham just revav bigday is chayiv misa. So then I think the minhag is to be makel, and we find this regarding Chol HaMoed, where they're also laundering is asa, but spot cleaning is mutter. So even though probably the 9 days is more chomer than Chol HaMoed, but if a person has no other choice, avada, it should be mutter. We once heard an interesting shaila. Someone, he had children, and all the clothing was dirty. They had to wash them, but it was a half a wash. Can he put in his clothing? Because once you do it anyhow, it's one press of the button. He's not scrubbing his own clothes; he's putting it in. So this is obviously wrong based on a Gemara. The Gemara says you can't even wash for Matzai Tisha B'Av. Why? Hesech Hadas. You can't even give it to the cleaners on Tisha B'Av, or 9 days for that matter. Hesech Hadas. So to wash, to put in the laundry, avada, that's awesome. So that would be, even though it's an empty load, so if you need it, make it. Chol HaMoed, by the way, is a different issa. Chol HaMoed, the issa is really, should be tzarech Yom Tov, the 2nd days. Shlei kanis to Yom Tov, kishum and mishnah. So that's why Chol HaMoed is different than the 9 days. But the 9 days, the focus is not Chalil to come to a Hesech Hadas of the Avelis. Polishing shoes is interesting. Mr. Zalman, when he was asked the question, he said, Zvachim, Tzaddalim Beis, Kol Kibus, the less Be Kiskus, Lo Yishmei Kibus. Kibus means scrubbing. Polishing shoes is no longer scrubbing. So Rabbi Yashu says, and I remember, I know what he's talking about, years ago, polishing was a big idilla. Remember, they used to have people on some corners, shoe shine. It was a big job. Today, it's basically applying liquid, which is zicha, not kibus, and even cream, but today is no longer brushing. It just put it on and it dries in. So he felt that that's no longer even a shaila of kibus. Now, if someone scrubs vigorously, or Moshe says, lahashchir, to blacken the shoes, okay. Lahavrik, to polish it back and forth, maybe he can hear it's awesome. But all agree on Erev L'Kavod Shabbos and Erev Shabbos is mutter to polish shoes. Pashas even Shabbos Chazon, because the Maisa, this is not the kibus of a mole. It used to be a much bigger job. The Zalman's Yisoid was that it's not awesome. But he says during the week it should not be done. I'll cover it for the 9 days, but the covered Shabbos, Halicha Shloim, Yudalet, Yudzayin, that would be mutter. Giving a matana is something that comes up quite often. You go for Shabbos to someone in his bungalow, you want to give a hostess gift, a bar mitzvah, a bris. So the emes is, I'm talking about you when you bought a beheta. The question of giving a matana on the 9 days, the chayra, that's a good candidate of being a davar mesameach. Who has simcha? Both. You give a matana, you feel good. You get a matana, you feel good. So the emes is, in svara, it should be awesome. But the pella is, this is not mentioned in any place in Gemara Shulchan Aruch. Gemara speaks in detail about what to do during the Shul Shechalboi, during the Rosh Chodesh on. No mention of matanas. I assume they had simchas, they gave the gifts. But the emes is maybe more than that. And you look at the Magen Avraham Tafkuf Nun Daled Siv Katan Chavav, he says not to give a matana on Tisha B'Av, because that's B'chlal She'ilah Shalom, that the Mechaber says is also on Tisha B'Av. Greeting someone is also on Tisha B'Av. So it's mashma, not only it's mashma in Svar that it's mutter, because we don't find it saying asa, but it's only asa on Tisha B'Av. And that's why Lemaisa, the Paiskim initial approach should be that it should not be a problem. This is not Tisha B'Av. For some reason it's only on Tisha B'Av. And there's a third Svar. And some say that when you go to someone's house and you go for Shabbat, you give a hostess gift, so it's menschlich. So I'm not saying you're paying for your stay, but it's something like a priyas choiv. Rav Shlomo Zalman said that svar in giving gifts. You're giving gift, you have to give the gift. It's something like paying up your debt. So it's not even a matana in a certain sense. So, again, Azeichel Adaba, the Divri Malkiel and Chelikei Reish Lamed Zayin, he says, although you're not allowed to give a Ovel, Mishleach Monis, on Purim, because you don't give an Ovel matana, but to give to the Rav is Mutter. Who's an Ovel? Why? Because that's really like part of the Choiv, that we give the Rav something. It's not a Simcha, it's something that you give because you almost feel it's a Mechiyav. So could be taka, and that's what makes sense. The Mekar Chaim, the Chavas Yor, in Tavkuf Nun Beis, says Beferish giving gifts on the 9 days is mutam, as does the Shari Tshuva on the Ramah Zayin, quoting Yavitz, giving matanas on mutam. Now some do argue, and I can hear it very strongly, if you do enjoy giving a gift, and you're not a kumtnich mensch, the person that gets it enjoys it, he doesn't think he gets it, he's kumtnich, so why shouldn't that be Nisaf Simcha? So Lamaisa, you have to use Seichel to give a very expensive gift. The Chassan Kal to get the gift, Leichter and all these things may be inappropriate. You're allowed to get engaged, but who's you have to give gifts? So Rabbi Yashiv felt the eighth is to give a gift, and he should be kinded after Tisha B'Av. Now this bothers me a little bit because he has it in his house, so who are you fooling? Teretz Adrab, you put in a dampener, you put in a strings attached. It's not yours. So it's sort of like a shtickle of Gita Toivel V'Sheretz B'Yadai. But in the case is, to give an expensive gift should be avoided. I will just mention that giving a mitzvah boy a gift should be done because he doesn't know about kunst and he knows this is my mitzvah and no one gave me a gift. So a little bit of a mishkal achsidis, and I'm not sure if this is shad, but in Ashrei Ish, they quote Rabbi Yashiv as saying, don't give matanis except for a mitzvah. I don't know if this is cheshbon, but definitely ben Ad Machavera here, the poor boy is waiting 13 years for this big day and he didn't get anything. So maybe taka, that would be okay, plus the gift is not as exorbitant as a chassan and kalam. But basically, again, the sensitivity Chazal had. Now, you can ask me a question. How could you say B'chlal it's ever awesome? We see in Hilchas Tisha B'Av, only on Tisha B'Av is awesome. Teretz Pasha. Tisha B'Av is talking about a gift that's not expensive. No shechianu. But just communicating is awesome, and gifting is also even an expensive item. But we're saying on Tisha B'Av to give an expensive item, it makes sense, that should not be done. Cutting nails is mutter on Erev Shabbos Chazon, even if it's chal on Erev Tisha B'Av. Another few questions I wanted to mention based on our Gemara. The people ask about allowing the gardener to do work on the 9 days. So the question is not so off track, because the Gemara says, Matin b'netiyah. The Mechaber's lashon is, Ein noit netiyah shel simcha. And that's why it's true. To decide suddenly on the 9 days, let me make a new landscaping, let me bring a gardener, or put in plants and flower and trees, Avad, that's wrong, no doubt about it. Landscaping on the 9 days is a problem, but maintaining one's garden, cutting grass, that I saw on River Sefardim, Chelik Aleph, he quotes Rav Moshe Bick and Rav Scheinberg, and Rav Vosno also said this, that basically maintaining the yard, cutting the grass, it shouldn't be overgrown, is not bichlal simcha. Adding things just to make a simcha dika atmosphere, that should be done after Tisha B'Av. By doing any type of renovations or repairs is a share for itself, but just legeil in yanenu, this is the Gemara. The Tiyos binyan is awesome, but as the Beis Yosef quotes the Ran and Shulchan Aruch quotes the Lashon, it's only building l'revacha, which means you don't really need it, but it's luxurious, it's a little extra. That should not be done during the 9 days. But what's needed, in fact, the Mechaber spells out, let's say there's a wall about to collapse, and there's no pekuach nefesh, but if it collapses, it's going to bring hezek. So you're not going to use it even. But saving hezek is mutter on the 9 days, just like it's mutter on chol hamoed. So to repair a pool, which is not even used during the 9 days, but if you don't do it now, it's going to get worse and worse, you're allowed to do it. And here's the problem that any camp or yeshiva has, that the yeshiva goes until Rosh Chodesh. So they have at most a month to make all the repairs and all the painting and all the plastering and all the renovations. When are you supposed to do it? So Avad, the yeshiva has a heta, first of all, that it's not l'ravacha, they do what's needed. Also, the Mechaber says that var mitzvah is mutter. So the yeshivas and camps that also have that problem, because they have first half, second half, they have to, in between, they have to straighten out a little bit. So whatever is either dvar mitzvah or to say from hefsid is mutter. The ikka issa is l'ravacha, which is the problem. When a person is making a simcha, can he wear big day Shabbos? So this is not pashut at all. The Shulchan Aruch, Ramah, for that matter, says that comes Shabbos Chazon, we wear regular bigday choil. It's a pella. No one knows the Ramah says. The Goyin says not to. The Goyin says Shabbos is Shabbos, and that's the minhag. Mr. quotes, that's the minhag b'roiv Tvutzas Yisrael. But no doubt about it, to wear bigday Shabbos during the week is inappropriate, or better yet, is wrong. And that's why the Paiskim say, when you have a heta to make a simcha, l'mashal a bris, a bar mitzvah, a pigeon, a ben, if you're allowed to have bas v'yayin, it's obviously mutter to wear bigday Shabbos. But when there's no need for bigday Shabbos, avad it's awesome. The Paiskim say when there's a meeting for shidduchim, maybe he has to look his best. So if he has nothing else, he can wear bigday Shabbos. That's a b'doichik. But if he has something appropriate, then avad avoid bigday Shabbos. Rabbi Yankel once told me, he says, it's a funny thing. The Ramah says not to wear bigday Shabbos, and Magen Avram and the Goyin changed it. What changed? So he said the Ramah lived in relative safety in Golus, and they had Panosa, and they didn't think about the Gula. Plus, they had to have a wake-up call, a very drastic wake-up call. We're wearing bigday choil, no streimel, no bekisha, no Shabbos suit, no shatai. We're wearing bigday choil, because Shabbos is suspended for Avelis. But the Goyin in the Litta and those countries, they had nothing. They only had a Shabbos Kodesh. You couldn't take away from them the Shabbos, which gives us a little of a perspective today how much we need the feeling of Avelis. And that's why Lamaisa, bigday Shabbos are only worn when there's a heta. What I must mention, sometimes you have a bar mitzvah bacham. He's bar mitzvah during Shabbos Chazon, so you have regular bar mitzvah Shabbos. Or an off-roof sometimes takes place on Shabbos Chazon. So you're allowed to wear bigday Shabbos. But the same Shulchan Aruch says that you can't wear a new beged. Mr. Bura quotes Achreinim, wearing a new beged is also on Shabbos, even on Shabbos. You're allowed to wear bigday Shabbos, but a new beged is awesome. So here, this is a point that's often overlooked. The mitzvah boy comes in proudly to shul on Shabbos. The first time he's wearing his suit, it's also als bigday chodesh b'Shabbos. A Shabbos of the off roof is a problem. So make sure that if you do have an off-roof or bar mitzvah on Shabbos Chazon, wear it before. Now, it's a particular problem of a bekisha. If he only wears it bar mitzvah, so give it to someone else to wear. But he can't wear a new beged on Shabbos Chazon. And the last question someone asked me, I felt it was a good question, about Rosh Chodesh. See, in his house, he follows the halacha. It's a one whole siman, one seif, to make a Sudas Rosh Chodesh. He has a very nice place to get Suda. What's the halacha on Rosh Chodesh of? So Lamaisa, you might say, the Lashon HaGemara, Rosh Chodesh is a deraisa. The pasuk says, Yom Simchas L'Modechem Rosh Chachechem. So maybe taka, it's mutter to have a regular Sudas Rosh Chodesh with meat on Rosh Chodesh of. However, by saying Mikra, by saying Mesvar. First of all, the Mechaber's Lashon is Mishenechnes of. That's Rosh Chodesh. Iboy saying Svara. We don't push off because of a mitzvah. We see Shabbos, some say they don't wear bigday Shabbos. But no doubt about it, that mitzvah is not enough to override the Issa of Basa V'Yayin. And that's what Mechaber says in Sif Test. Yesh by Sifin, Rosh Chodesh ve'elech, Mishtabura, Rosh Chodesh b'chlal b'chein haminig. The Seder Yoim says Rosh Chodesh atzmoi, even though Rosh Chodesh is a Yoim Simcha, but not Rosh Chodesh of, it's a Muchal Apronius, it's Reya Mazlei, we lost Aaron HaKoyen on that day, and don't make it different than any other day. Now, so this person said, should I buy at least something different, a cheese Danish to cover Rosh Chodesh? So that's your chinuch prerogative. Either you could say, Kinderlach, Rosh Chodesh is so important, I bought you something, but you can't have Bas Yayin. Or maybe say, you know what, Rosh Chodesh of is different, not even a cheese Danish. Whatever the children will take as a chinuch lesson, but it has to be done with seichel. The only exception is, Mr. Rua quotes the Kiva Egu, quotes the earlier Paiskim, Shechiyanu is allowed to be said on Rosh Chodesh. Because the whole Shechiyanu is not really an Issa. It's only al tzlachatchil b'zman hazeh. And now, just one more point I should mention. It's always the hardest. Koshalai Pidaschem. We had a Baruch Shema wonderful year together. I want to just take this opportunity to thank all those that made this possible. First of all, the Beis Medrash was always gracious and always very accommodating. Especially Ashikoyach of Simcha Deutsch for being the Mosabel Lev Nefesh for all of our shiurim. On a personal level, I must thank Rabbi Rosenbaum for all he does for me all the time. and each and every one of you is important. You know, our policy, we have exactly how much we need. We have, no one's missing, but everybody's appreciated. So I thank you, each and every one of you, for coming, and most importantly, Achrei Chava, Rabbi Baruch Bald, who's probably one of the biggest Mabritzei Torah in our times. And the more I know him, the more I see that this is Kulei Torah, Kulei Avos HaTorah. He's someone that's totally Mosa for the Baruch Sham's Torah, with no zich, with no me, with no agenda. The Baruch Shem should give him koiches to being Marbitz Torah L'Orch Yamim Tovim. And to all of us we say, we should be Zoich V'Rei Ben Chamasa, M'her V'Yemeinu, Amen.
Of course, the biggest yashikach goes to Rav Smith Shlita for spending a whole week and preparing and harving to prepare the sugya with a klogkeit and to give it over to Tam Vadas all these over 30 years. But Hashem, they shall provide Tarich Hashem V'Shalom Tovis. We also give a curse to Tov to the shul, this Meshkal and Stones being the Achsanya, and now and providing some nice air conditioning. Now they're making a campaign for the Nela Mor. We're going to be Mishtativ. Rabbi Malachitnik was here, and have a chelik in the upkeep of the shul, and of course I'll talk to the shul. Zuma will be a seeker after Kaddish, but Zuma. Can I be a kashem? Rotzakes Bogle Zakis, as a sort of Hibbam Term, Midashanem, Ala Neuchofis, and Matzidka, Yagdol Terviade.
Hey! Hey!
So if you don't see Rabbi Malachitnik, you can give me the money to be started with the Nela Moyer. The seeking of today's share, of 9 days. Remember the Tov Lev Mishnah Tomid.
Yeah, the Mishnah says Mama'itין B'Simcha, and what it means, some say even in Gansin, but it doesn't mean Avodas Hashem or Chashvam Atzvis. It means we don't do anything that brings a feeling of Simcha, any activity of Simcha. The days are days of Avelos and Peronias, both Batei Migdash of Zakhtishla is Edom and Bavel. Kedai Beisel Ekenu, we see in Halacha Lamaisa in the olden days, Akapanim, that Yom Kippur is Tisha B'Av is more Chama than Yom Kippur. The Basa and Yayin is only the minhag. Miyikadin is Mutta until the Suda Mafsekes. The Avelos Be'ikah begins, the Shvur Shechal Boy, our minhag is earlier, the minhag of Ashkenazim. But the real Mishnechnes of Matim Simcha is activities that bring Simcha, and or realizing that it's a Reya Mazle and push off a court case and avoid dangerous things, especially during the Rish Chodesh and onward. The minhag is only a minhag, not making Shechianu. Make it a din if a person has to, he's allowed to make it. Nisuin is din ha-mishnah, not from, they're not to get married, taka during the 9 days. The Ashkenazim started by the 3 weeks. The concept of Hesach Hadas, we see in Halacha, Nati Masiyach Das, and to try to stimulate a little of Agmas Nefesh with the children, we see children that brings Agmas Nefesh. Getting engaged is muti even on Tisha B'Av, Shami Yakimenu Acha, but there's no Suda, and during the 9 days, barely a Kibbut Kal, with schnapps and cake, but not even singing. Best to push it off until after the 9 days. The concept of a Sudas Mitzvah is even a Bar Mitzvah, is a real Sudas Mitzvah. Kiddush Levana is typically either pushed off till after Tisha B'Av. If it's done before, no dancing by that Kiddush Levana. Buying begadim, even inexpensive, are also in the 9 days. It's just items that you needed, svarim or silverware, etc. is mutter. Spot cleaning, l'chara should be mutter. Adding to the washing machine when you're washing the child is vadei osa, that's hesach hadas. Polishing shoes, cutting nails are both mutter, covered Shabbos. Certainly, a gardener that's just maintaining the garden is okay. If it's adding yoifi, it should be after Tisha B'Av. The concept of dvar mitzvah, which is mutter, any type of activity at home of building. Harvacha is the problem. Dvar mitzvah is mutter. Hefsid is mutter. Big day Shabbos we wear on Shabbos, not a new beged, but big day Shabbos. The mitzvah boy in an off-roof should keep that in mind, that it should be worn before the 9 days. And Rosh Chodesh, it's probably better to make it a day of Avelis, that the children know that this is not a regular Rosh Chodesh, and they should be Zeicha V'Raya B'Nechamas. Is it? Take care.